Hi everybody, it's me again. I wanted to go over standard costs. This is chapter 11, standard cost. I'm going to go through the explanation of the standard cost. Then I'm going to take another video and we'll talk about a major problem that the text has called Darrington, and we'll also have a few other problems that we'll be working on after that. If this is in the new text that I'm going to take, which is a general approach, and it goes away all the way from page 412 through, let's see, 424 here, if you got your text. First of all, as it shows on the screen, the standard cost refers to the cost that management believes should be incurred to produce a good or services under anticipated conditions. Companies that have standard costing systems can analyze the difference between a standard and an actual cost, referred to as a standard cost variance, to determine whether operations are being performed efficiently. The analysis, referred to as variance analysis, generally involves decomposing or breaking down the difference between standard and actual cost into two components. For example, direct material. The two components are the material price variance and the material quantity variances. For direct labor, the two components are the labor rate variance and the labor efficiency variances. For manufacturing overhead, the two components are the controllable overhead variance and the overhead volume variance. We're going to talk a little bit more about each one of these things. So let's go to the next place here. So you can see in the top of the screen, I've got material variances, labor variances, and overhead variances. So if we start with material variances, the material, they have the actual material cost as compared with the actual quantity at standard cost to come up with the material price variance. And in this specific situation, you have the actual quantity times the actual price of a $200,000 unit purchase here at $9.90. So that total purchase price is $1,980,000. And that's compared to the actual quantity at standard cost. So the actual quantity is at 200,000, but which is the units, but the standard cost is $10, so the actual quantity at standard cost is $2 million. So the material price difference variance is the difference between the actual price, $9.90, minus the standard price, which is $10, times the actual quantity. So you can see, you take $9.90 and subtract $10 from it, and you get a 0.10, and that gets multiplied. Yes, it's going to get 10 cents or 10, and that's going to get multiplied times the actual quantity of 200,000. So we come up with a favorable variance of $20,000. And the reason it's favorable is because the actual price at $9.90 is lower than the standard price of $10. So anyway, that's the difference to come up with the material price variance. Now, the material quantity variance is the difference between the actual quantity used in production and the standard material cost. So the actual quantity used in production, in this case, is 181,000, and it's multiplied by the standard cost. So the actual quantity used in production is $1,810,000. The standard cost is the amount which is standard 180,000 times the standard price, which is $10. So the standard material standard cost is $1,800,000. So you subtract the two differences, and you can see that the material quantity variance is the difference between 181,000 and 180,000, which is 10,000, and you multiply that by $10 and come up with a $10,000 unfavorable variance, because more were put into production than is the standard. So that's the material price variance. Now let's look at the labor variance. The labor variance in the first of all, we're going to take this. The actual labor cost is the actual hours. In this case, it's 1,700 hours times the actual rate, which is $15.50. So you multiply those together, and we come up with $26,350. That's the actual labor cost. The actual quantity at standard cost is the actual hours, 1,700 hours, times the standard rate, and the standard rate is $15. So the actual quantity times the standard rate, is $25,500. So the difference between the two is $850, and it's unfavorable because the actual labor cost is greater than the actual quantity at standard. Now, to come up with the labor efficiency variance, we're going to come up with we're going to compare the actual quantity at the standard cost, which is $25,000, compare it with the standard labor cost, which is $27,000, and we come up with a favorable $1,500. And the reason it's favorable is because the actual quantity at standard is lower than the standard labor cost. Another way of looking at that is we're going to take the, and I've got it here, we take the actual hours that were that used, and we subtract that from the standard hours and multiply that by the standard rate to come up with that labor efficiency variance. Now let's look at the overhead variance. The overhead actual cost is compared with the flexible budgeted overhead, and the difference between those two comes up with the controllable overhead variance. So if actual overhead labor is, in this case, $23,000, and it's compared with the $24,000, which is associated with the flexible budget variance, and so the difference is $1,000, and it's favorable because the actual overhead cost is lower than the flexible budget overhead. Now, the overhead volume variance is the difference between the overhead applied using the standard rate, which is $22,500, and you compare that with the flexible budget and come up with a unfavorable overhead volume variance. And basically what that says is that we've applied more, we had more operation than we had budgeted for. And in the book, we'll talk about that variance is not that significant. That the most significant variance for overhead variances is this controllable overhead variance, which is the difference between the actual cost and the flexible budget overhead. Well, I hope this is give you a little bit of a view of what the variances are in this standard cost system. We'll do a little bit more. We're going to do a problem here in the next video, but I encourage you to look at this and understand this is the basic aspects of these standard cost variances: material, labor, and overhead variances. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.